We kick off this, mostly, end of the era with more of ISN, announcing about Clark's suicide and that Sheridan surrendered himself to Earth Force authorities to determine what is to happen next. Susanna Lachenko, now the acting president of Earth, calls for people to accept handling Clark's flunkies through the courts and not in the Mussolini style. But on B5, the news is less good, as Marcus has passed out over Ivanova's body, still hooked up to the machine. After the titles, we find out that he did indeed die from the transfer, his entire life force used to completely heal her, physically anyway. She's crushed that he gave up his life for her, and Dr. Franklin frustrated that Marcus was able to hack through security to access those logs, and possibly the folder with alien dicks compatible for human transplants. Ivanova had actually made her peace with death. Not that it was a preference or anything, but she was okay with it. That Marcus would bring her back by dying himself, especially as the first person she ever thought about being with that she knew would never hurt or leave her, meant that she only survives if he hurts and leaves her. I mean, what's more painful than that?
You're late?
No. You're early.
I am never premature.
Ah, well, that is a surprise, given what I've heard.
Besides the payoff of that setup. Veer shows up soon after to tell Londo that the homeworld called. Seems the regent is ill. Well, Londo doesn't particularly care, until he learns that after the regent passes, they want Londo to take over as emperor. He doesn't take that news with the jubilation you'd think, but while he, G'Kar, and Veer get on that ship for Earth, we find Bester's paying Sheridan a visit. He says that hypothetically the virus that Edgar's had made to target telepaths would be destroyed, while keeping the cure around as a failsafe, should someone develop it again. Hypothetically. But he has no idea about Elise, nor does he care. She's no longer a threat, and so no longer his problem. But what is Sheridan's use of the frozen telepaths, because one was his lover, remember.
And if she was killed because of it, you have to understand that you will not leave this room alive.
That would require some fancy tap dancing to explain. We were just talking and suddenly he came down with a case of exploding head syndrome. Sometimes it's a side effect of growing a beard in captivity. Sheridan makes the point that the difference between what he did and what Bester does is that Bester actually enjoys using people, while Sheridan hated having used those telepaths as weapons. So he told Franklin to only use ones who were single, with no family, and likely incurable. However, that also applies to Bester's lover, so he is not happy. But Sheridan knew what she did, in fact, have with Bester, and he may not like the man, but he's not going to choose her just to spite Bester. Spite's generally not a good justification for life and death decisions, I think. No one should pay with the justification of, and I don't like your face either. But Sheridan does take this chance to tell Bester he knows that Edgar's was right about moving telepaths into positions to attempt to gain control, and that if he tries to start a war, he's going to lose. Oh, and also tells him Garibaldi is very unhappy. See, and all he did was talk during a movie. Meanwhile, G'Kar and Londo have arrived on Delen's ship, where she shares a proposal, something outrageous enough to make Londo laugh like he was finally getting Rito and Zudi. While she shares it with the rest of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, Sheridan gets a visit from the acting president. Her approach is political. I think that would be the best word. Sheridan committed, at best, mutiny, she says. He led an attack against his own government. If he resigns, though, this all goes away.
And if I refuse?
You'll be dishonorably discharged, court-martialed, and brought to trial.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Same for Ivanova and the rest of your staff. And I'll make sure that the military tribunal is stacked with generals from the shoot him category.
I've given this a great deal of thought, and I think she's bluffing. I think she's terrified of Sheridan taking over Earth right now. Because I see no legitimate courts saying that Sheridan rebelled against his own government. When the news got out that Clark had arranged for Santiago's assassination, Clark then seized ISN by force, purged his opponents, declared martial law, had people arrested, tortured, and murdered. Any lawyer will sensibly argue that Sheridan wasn't fighting the Earth government. He was fighting the forces that had overthrown the government. Obviously, the Earth government is fictional. We don't know what is and isn't legal there, what its declaration of freedoms might be and such. So, of course, this isn't set in stone, but I do know if Sheridan were an American military officer, his oath would be to fight enemies of the country that were both foreign and domestic. And anyone who overthrows the legitimate government by violating basic laws, purging elected leaders and respected members of the military high command, and refuses to answer for the crimes that he has been accused of, that's a domestic enemy. If Sheridan had the overwhelming evidence that his government had been overthrown and replaced, then not only was it acceptable to oppose Clark, he was duty-bound to oppose Clark. Sheridan wasn't fighting his government. He was defending it. So it seems quite clear to me that she knows if they try, in any way, to put him on trial, they'll just look foolish. And if they try to railroad him like she suggested, then that's going to lead to a revolt. These people have spent more than a year living under a despotic, stacked system. Do you think the moment they taste freedom again, they're going to tolerate it happening to the man who finally took the boot off their neck? No, the only hope is that they can cow him into voluntarily doing what they want, to ensure that he's not suddenly declared the new head of the Earth government by the popular demands of the people. Back on Mars, Garibaldi's been trying to track down Lise, figuring that she must have asked the Martian mob to get her off planet, and they kept her, figuring they could get more money that way. What they got was... Someone order a delivery of Rangers? So Lise is rescued, that point is wrapped up, and Delenn arrives over Earth with her task complete and having a little free time to talk with Lennier about what happened to Marcus. In it, Lennier repeats what Ivanova had said in her grief. All love is unrequited. As a way of his signaling, hey, what am I, chopped flarn here? Give your sidekick some sugar. So, time for the speech, where the president says, hey, I think both sides in Earth Force had a point. Because, she's in politics. But Sheridan's also the hero of the hour, so she defends that his heart was always with Earth, no matter what the guy who turned Earth's own weapons against him might have been saying about him. Shocker, the torturing mass murderer sometimes told fibs, too. Sheridan gives a little speech, naturally, where he says that to save Earth, he must walk away from his love of duty. He says it better than me, of course. He's trained in elocution. I was trained to be able to get small children to shut the hell up. After he tenders his resignation, the president says that G'Kar is going to also make a statement on behalf of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds. First, that they're going to be dissolved. As in the organization, not like with Clark and his acid vat. It is to be replaced by a new alliance, an interstellar alliance, inspired by the example of humanity's forging of communities. It will help improve conditions of less advanced members, promote free trade, and work to create peace, aided by the Rangers. That would be them now. They'll be there to help create peace, but they're not like Gort. They're not going to try to enforce the peace. This is a political and economic alliance, she makes clear. This isn't about creating a unified government or anything. It's about a mutually beneficial arrangement between the powers. The president says in a private meeting that she sees the appeal, but needs some sugar to get everyone to take their medicine. It's unstated, but they have, after all, spent years being bombarded with messages to be mistrustful of aliens. Having to deal with aliens the moment that Clark falls, that could create some hesitation. So Delenn offers artificial gravity as an opening example of what Earth has to gain. If the acting president wants to hear more, she should talk to the duly elected president of the Alliance.
You! Funny thing about retiring. You no sooner pick out the places you want to go on vacation than someone comes at you with another job offer.
After mentioning that he and Delenn had been planning something along these lines for months, trying to get the League to accept the Rangers and depend more on each other instead of squabbling, well, it seems to have all worked out. And as a bonus, Sheridan's father shows up. He's been freed. Everything's looking good, and soon ISN reports Earth's choice to join the Interstellar Alliance. Who can say no to manipulating gravity? It's like being a poor man's Magneto. But there are still some strings attached.
Later this afternoon, President Lutsenko will sign an executive order declaring Mars a free and independent world.
Obviously, this will have to be ratified by the Senate.
Frickin' hope so. I don't think we'd be comfortable knowing the president could just decide on a whim that Arkansas is an independent country now. I'd like to think that there'd be some people around to look over that and give it their approval. On Mars, Garibaldi and Lise finally have some quality time. Nice that those stars have finally aligned between them. As for Ivanova, she's been promoted to captain and is going off on a 1-year shakedown cruise in one of the new ships. Finally, Sheridan and Delenn have been married in a private ceremony, leaving G'Kar and Londo alone to discuss making history, while G'Kar nibbles on the bits of rice that he collected from the ceremony. Oh, and also... dinner and a show. Delenn closes out this period with a narration about the New Age, the coming telepath war, the Drakh War, but in the end, there's the endurance of Babylon 5.